All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the IELTS reading section.
It's a big one.
Oh, yeah. Huge for anyone looking to boost that band score. We've got some awesome sources lined up to help us come up with a solid battle plan.
A battle plan. I like that.
You know, the good news is you don't have to memorize every word in the dictionary to ace this thing. It's more about strategy and, well, time management.
Time management is huge. Absolutely crucial. It's kind of like imagine a student. We'll call her Sarah. She jumps into that first passage without a plan. You know what happens?
Disaster.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
She might spend way too much time on those easier questions, and then, bam, she's scrambling to finish the tough ones.
Right, so she needs a roadmap, like some sort of guide to help her navigate this whole IELTS maze.
Exactly, and that's where understanding the format comes in, right?
Yeah, totally. So break it down for us. What does this beast of a section look like?
Okay, so picture this. 3 passages, each one getting progressively harder. You've got 60 minutes to answer 40 questions.
60 minutes. Okay.
So, if Sarah, our student, divides her time wisely, she can really set herself up for success. Passage 1, the easiest one, should take about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Got it.
Passage 2, that one's more complex, so we're looking at around 20 minutes for that one. And lastly, passage 3, that's the real brain teaser. That one needs a good 25 minutes.
Okay, I see. So it's like a mental marathon. You got to pace yourself.
Exactly. Pacing is key.
Now, speaking of strategy and pacing, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is trying to read every single word.
Oh, I know. The classic trap.
It's like you're staring at this wall of text, and suddenly the pressure's on.
You feel that clock ticking.
Yeah, and you just freeze up.
It's a total trap. Even experienced readers fall for it sometimes. They get so caught up in the tiny details, they miss the big picture.
The big picture being answering those questions correctly, right? And within that time limit.
Exactly. And that's where those awesome reading techniques you mentioned come in. Skimming and scanning. They're like your secret weapons.
Yeah.
But, it's not just about skimming and scanning randomly. It's about using them the right way for the IELTS.
Okay, so let's break this down. Let's help Sarah and all our listeners master these techniques. Let's start with skimming. That's about getting the gist without getting lost in the weeds. How do you do that with an IELTS passage?
Think of it like this. You're a detective at a crime scene. You're not going to, study every little speck of dust. You're looking for the key pieces of evidence.
Right, the clues that tell the story.
Yeah, it's the same with an IELTS passage. You're scanning for those clues that reveal the main theme, the structure. Things like headings, subheadings, those are your gold mines. Don't forget the first and last sentences of each paragraph. Super helpful.
So you're actively searching for those signposts. You're not just passively reading.
Exactly. And the more you practice skimming these IELTS passages, the better you'll get at it. It'll become second nature.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, how about scanning? That's like our laser focus, right? We're hunting for specific details.
Yes. And in the IELTS, it could be anything, a name, a date, a theory, anything mentioned in the passage. It's kind of like using Treatrol plus F on your computer,
Like when you're searching for something online, we do it all the time, but applying it strategically to the IELTS, that takes practice. Especially because, as we know, the test makers love to paraphrase things.
Oh, they're masters of it.
Yeah.
You're almost never going to see those word-for-word matches between the questions and the text.
So it's like a mental agility test in a way, right? You need to be able to spot those subtle shifts in language and still get the meaning.
Exactly. And this is where having a strong vocabulary really helps. And it's not just about knowing a lot of words. It's about understanding how those words can be used in different ways.
Right, like having all the right tools in your toolbox.
Exactly. That way, you're ready for any paraphrasing challenge they throw at you.
All right, so we've got Sarah equipped with her skimming and scanning skills. She's getting a grip on paraphrasing. Now, let's talk about those IELTS questions. Because not all questions are created equal, are they?
Not at all. Some are definitely trickier than others.
Yeah, and knowing how to approach them strategically can save Sarah tons of time and energy.
Absolutely. And remember, time management is super important in this section. You've got roughly like a minute and a half per question, but some questions just naturally take longer.
Right.
So prioritizing is key. Start with what I call the easy wins. Question types like matching headings, sentence completion, matching information, those usually follow the flow of the passage, so you can often knock them out pretty quickly.
It's like a triage system. You got to address those most critical cases first.
I love that analogy. And once Sarah's tackled those easy wins, she can move on to the more challenging ones, those true, false not given, yes not given questions. They usually require a bit more, deep thinking. more careful analysis.
All right, I like it. Sarah's starting to see the IELTS reading section not as this big scary monster, but as a series of strategic challenges. She's got her skimming and scanning ready to go. She's building her vocabulary to handle paraphrasing, and she's understanding the importance of tackling questions strategically. But, let's be real. Even with all the prep in the world, test day can be nerve-wracking.
It definitely can be. But, those nerves are normal. It means you care about doing well. The key is to not let them take over. One technique I always recommend is visualization.
Visualization.
Like before the test, close your eyes and imagine yourself confidently tackling the reading section. See yourself using those skimming and scanning techniques, calmly analyzing the questions, managing your time like a pro.
Creating a mental blueprint for success.
Exactly. And remember, you've prepared for this, so trust in your abilities. Trust in the effort you've put in.
Okay, I think we've given Sarah and all our listeners a solid foundation for tackling this IELTS reading section. We've looked at the structure of the test, the importance of those strategic reading techniques, and even touched on managing that test day anxiety. But there's still more to uncover, right?
We've just scratched the surface. We've got lots more to explore.
Awesome. So in part 2, we're going to delve deeper into those trickier question types and give you even more targeted strategies for success.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive. Let's keep unraveling those IELTS reading mysteries, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. We left Sarah and all our listeners on a bit of a cliffhanger. We talked about the overall structure, the importance of those smart reading techniques, and how to handle test day nerves. Now it's time to tackle some of those question types that can be a bit intimidating.
Right.
The ones that make you go, wait, what?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
And one that I hear students struggling with a lot are those true, false, not given, and yes, not given questions. They're like, oh, they can be tricky. Real tricky.
Yeah, they can feel like you're walking through a minefield. You're just waiting for that wrong step to blow up your score.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I used to feel the same way when I was prepping for these kinds of tests. It's easy to get caught up in the wording and start doubting yourself.
Yeah.
But the key, and it's easier said than done, is to remember what these question types are really testing you on. They're checking your ability to interpret information accurately. Can you tell the difference between what's directly stated, what you can infer, and what's just not there at all?
Right. So it's more than just finding a word-for-word match. It's about reading between the lines, understanding the nuances, drawing logical conclusions from the information given. But, without going too far off the deep end, right?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. That's where a lot of test takers trip up. They start overthinking, searching for these hidden meanings that aren't actually there. Maybe an example would help. Imagine the passage says, the study found that there was a correlation between sleep deprivation and decreased cognitive function. Okay. So then the question asks, does lack of sleep directly cause impaired thinking? What do you think?
Okay. So the passage mentions a correlation, a connection, but it doesn't come right out and say that lack of sleep directly causes impaired thinking. Even though, it seems logical, we can't really say true, can we?
You got it. That's a classic not given scenario. The information is just not there to confirm or deny the statement. But now, what if the question asked, is there a link between sleep patterns and cognitive performance? Then what?
Then I think we could confidently say true, right? Because the passage clearly states that correlation.
Exactly. It all comes back to sticking to the facts presented in the passage and not letting our assumptions or, what we might know from outside influence our answers.
Don't read what you want to see. Read what's actually there.
Right. And if you're really unsure, honestly, it's often better to just mark not given and move on. Don't get stuck agonizing over a single question and then run out of time.
That's a good point. Time is precious in this test. All right, so this is super helpful. I think a lot of test takers, and definitely Sarah, can learn a lot from this. Now, can we switch gears to another question type that tends to cause some confusion? What about those matching headings questions?
Ah, yes, matching headings. The ultimate test of your ability to see the big picture. These questions ask you to match headings to different paragraphs or sections of the passage. And here's the thing, a lot of people try to tackle this by reading each paragraph in detail and then searching for a match, but that's not really the most efficient way.
Okay, so what's the secret to these matching headings? How can Sarah approach this in a smarter way?
It all comes down to understanding that those headings are basically like mini summaries of the main idea of each paragraph or section. What you're trying to do is identify that core theme or argument. Remember our detective analogy.
Yeah.
This time, you're the lead detective. you know, searching for that one piece of evidence that unlocks the whole case.
So instead of getting lost in the details of each paragraph, Sarah should focus on extracting the essence, the main point. Are there any clues that stand out? Anything she should be paying attention to?
Oh, definitely. The first and last sentences of each paragraph, super important. They often have what we call topic sentences that lay out the paragraph's main idea. And don't forget those helpful headings and subheadings within the passage itself. They can be like those giant arrows pointing you in the right direction.
Right, like creating a map of the passage before you even start matching the headings.
Exactly. And once you've got a grasp of those main ideas, take a look at the list of headings and see if you can anticipate what kind of info you'd expect to find under each one. For example, if you have a heading that says the impact of social media on teenagers, you'd naturally expect the paragraph to talk about, different effects of social media use on teens.
It's like a matching game, but with deeper meaning, making sure that heading truly reflects what the paragraph is all about.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to use process of elimination. If you know for sure that a heading doesn't fit a certain paragraph, cross it off your list. It narrows down your options and can save you a lot of time.
Okay, this is making a lot more sense. Sarah's starting to see this question type not as a jumbled mess, but as a puzzle she can solve strategically.
That's exactly what it is. And remember, the IELTS reading section is not about speed reading or memorizing a bunch of facts. It's about skill. And those skills can be developed and sharpened with practice.
And that brings us to the end of part 2. We've given Sarah and all our listeners a really solid framework for understanding and approaching those sometimes tricky true, false, not given, and matching headings questions. But we're not done yet. There's still more ground to cover.
Oh yeah, we're just getting warmed up.
In part 3, we'll dive into some final tips and strategies to help you really max out that score on the IELTS reading section. Stay with us. Welcome back to the final part of our IELTS reading deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From understanding how the test is structured to breaking down those tricky question types. I feel like Sarah's ready for anything.
Almost. It's like we've given her this amazing toolbox full of all the right tools, but now she needs to practice using them, with precision and with confidence. That's where the timed practice really comes in.
Yeah, I agree. Because, it's one thing to understand these strategies, but it's another thing entirely to actually apply them, right? Under pressure.
Exactly. And just like an athlete trains for a big competition, you have to train your brain to perform at its best. And that's why those practice tests are so important. They give you that safe space to experiment, to push your limits, to really refine your approach until it becomes second nature.
Right, like a dress rehearsal. And, speaking of practice, I think a lot of test takers kind of underestimate the power of mental rehearsal. It's not just about cramming in information. It's about training your mind to perform under pressure. And speaking of pressure, let's talk focus. 60 minutes of intense reading can be exhausting. How can Sarah, or anyone taking this test, maintain that laser focus? Avoid those concentration dips.
Well, that's where mindfulness comes in. It's about being fully present in the moment.
Right.
Right. Quieting that inner chatter and minimizing distractions. It's like you're not just casually reading a magazine, you're on a mission.
Yeah, this is a serious mission.
Exactly.
I remember when I was prepping for standardized tests, I used to get so distracted. The ticking clock, the pressure I was putting on myself, it was like my mind was working against me.
Oh, I totally get it. It happens to a lot of people. It's like this inner critic just taking over. And that's why, developing these mindfulness techniques can be so helpful. It's not about, ignoring those thoughts or anxieties completely. It's more about acknowledging them and then gently guiding your attention back to what matters.
Back to the task at hand.
Right. It's like, think of your focus as a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it gets, the better it can handle those distractions.
Yeah, I like that. Focus as a muscle. So it's like a mental marathon, too. Got to build up that stamina.
Exactly. And remember, mindfulness doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing. It could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before you start reading, or, consciously minimizing those distractions around you. Even small changes can make a big difference.
All right, deep breaths. Got it. But let's face it, even with all the preparation and mindfulness in the world, test day anxiety is real. Any advice for Sarah? Or anyone else battling those pre-test jitters?
Well, first of all, it's totally normal to feel anxious before a big test like the IELTS. It means you care about doing well. The important thing is to not let those nerves control you. Remember those visualization techniques we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, they're not just for practicing the skills. They're great for managing anxiety, too.
So before the test, Sarah could close her eyes and imagine herself, walking into that test center, feeling calm, feeling confident. Picture herself breezing through that reading section with focus and ease.
Exactly. It's all about creating this positive mental script, replacing those anxious thoughts with, images of success. And remember, you've prepared for this. You've put in the work. Trust yourself.
Yeah, trust yourself. It's like silencing that inner critic and letting your inner champion take over.
Love it. And another thing that can help is positive self-talk. Replace those thoughts like I'm going to fail with things like I'm prepared. I could do this.
Right, I got this. Turn those negative thoughts into something positive, something empowering.
Yeah.
I think that's a great message to end on. We've given Sarah and all our listeners a really powerful set of tools to conquer this IELTS reading section. From those strategic reading techniques to mindfulness and those anxiety-busting strategies, it's time to go out there and ace this test.
Absolutely. The IELTS reading section is tough, but you can do it. With the right strategies, consistent practice, and belief in yourself, you've got this.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the IELTS reading section. I hope you found this journey informative and helpful. Every step you take, every practice test you conquer, every bit of effort, it all gets you closer to your goal. Now go out there and make it happen.